So you want to dive into some arguments about how some people say Jesus is God.
Yeah.
Specifically, you sent over this YouTube video by Jonathan Morrow.
Right.
And he says he's got one verse that proves it.
Okay.
So let's unpack this together.
So that's good.
And we'll see if this verse really holds up to scrutiny.
All right.
So Morrow starts off by saying,
Okay.
we shouldn't just rely on personal belief,
Mm.
like I just believe it,
Right.
or on just biblical authority alone.
Yeah.
Like, just because the Bible says so.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
He's suggesting that those approaches might work for some people.
Yeah.
They're not going to convince a skeptic.
Right. Yeah. They're not really going to resonate with someone who doesn't already kind of buy into that worldview.
Sure, exactly.
So I think he's got a point there.
Yeah.
If you want to have a meaningful conversation
Right.
with people who hold different perspectives,
Yeah.
you really need to move beyond just like stating beliefs.
Yeah.
And really engage with like evidence and logic.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like
We're
trying to
talking,
explain a scientific concept without using data or studies or anything like that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't carry the same weight.
So instead of saying, because the Bible said so,
Yeah.
Morrow says we should look at historical evidence.
Yeah.
He even compares it to like,
Oh.
you know how we understand other historical events?
Right.
Like, we wouldn't just take somebody's word for it that the printing press was invented in like 1450.
Right.
We would want to see evidence. Right.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need more than just somebody saying,
Right.
oh, yeah, this is when it happened.
Yeah.
We want like the historical artifacts.
Yeah.
And, you know, the records and stuff like that.
And that's where these early Christian texts,
Right.
like the Gospels, come in.
Exactly.
Because they offer these potential insights into the historical context surrounding Jesus.
Totally. And his teachings and the claims made about him.
Right.
And it's important to remember that these texts aren't just like theological treatises or something like that.
Right.
There's historical documents too.
Right.
They were written relatively close to the events that they describe.
Okay, so we could be getting like glimpses of eyewitness accounts.
Exactly.
And like firsthand knowledge.
Potentially.
Yeah. So this brings us to Morrow's chosen verse.
Okay.
Which comes from the Gospel of Mark.
Right.
Often considered the earliest of the four Gospels. Mark 14.61 task 62.
Choosing Mark as like the earliest gospel.
Yeah.
I mean, that does add a certain weight to it, I think.
So to really get to the heart of this, let's break down this verse phrase by phrase.
Well, sounds good.
So the setting is Jesus' trial before the high priest. And he's asked directly, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?
Right.
Now, these titles, particularly in a Jewish context, are loaded with meaning.
For sure.
So Christ, of course, is the Greek word for Messiah.
Which is this figure who's prophesied to liberate and restore Israel.
Right.
And the term Son of the Blessed One was a way of referring to God without directly naming him.
Right.
And it acknowledges his holiness and transcendence.
Yeah. I mean, these weren't just like
Right.
inquiries about Jesus' identity. They were probing his claim to divine authority.
Exactly. And what's Jesus's answer?
Let's see.
I am.
Wow.
Just two words.
Yeah.
But given the context,
Right.
they carry a lot of weight.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It's almost like it echoes the divine name revealed to Moses in the burning bush.
Right. I am, WHO, I am.
Yeah.
You could definitely argue that there's that sense of authority in Jesus's response.
Yeah.
And maybe even a subtle claim to divinity.
But he doesn't stop there.
Okay.
Jesus continues, you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven.
Now, this immediately brings to mind Daniel 7.1314.
Right.
A passage deeply ingrained in Jewish tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Daniel, we see this vision of one, like a son of man, coming before God.
Right.
And being granted everlasting dominion
Yeah.
and authority over all nations.
Wow.
It's such a powerful image of like divine kingship
Yeah.
and judgment
Yeah.
and the coming kingdom of God.
So by aligning himself with this Son of Man figure,
Right.
Jesus is arguably doing more than just claiming to be like a prophet or a teacher. He's seemingly connecting himself to the ultimate power and authority of God.
It's a bold statement for sure.
And the high priest's reaction is telling.
That
He tears his clothes and exclaims, "You have heard the blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? You have heard it yourselves."
Whoa.
The charge of blasphemy reveals just how seriously they took Jesus' words.
Yeah, it really shows you that,
Right.
that they weren't taking this lightly at all.
So blasphemy in that context was a serious offense.
Right.
It involved speaking against God, usurping his authority,
Right.
or claiming his prerogatives.
Right.
It was a crime punishable by death.
Wow. So the high priest clearly interpreted Jesus's words as like a direct claim to divinity.
Yeah.
Which was like a challenge to the very core of their religious beliefs.
This raises the question,
Yeah.
did Jesus, by invoking this Son of Man imagery, actually claim to be God
Right.
in the way that Mauro is suggesting?
Okay, so that's what we need to unpack.
Yeah.
And kind of figure out.
Let's delve into the complexities of this argument and see if this one verse truly supports such a weighty claim.
Sounds good.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
You know, it's almost like we're seeing this like clash of worldviews here, like how Jesus is presenting himself is clashing with how the authorities understand those claims.
Exactly. And it's that clash that ultimately leads to his condemnation.
Yeah.
But you know, one thing that strikes me is that even if we acknowledge that there are like inherent ambiguities in this text, the high priest's reaction is so extreme.
Right.
It really speaks volumes.
Yeah. It suggests that regardless of like the exact nature of Jesus's claims, they were disruptive.
Totally.
And a direct challenge to like the power structure.
The existing religious power structure for sure.
Yeah. When we look at Mauro's interpretation of this verse, we have to acknowledge that this Son of Man concept is complex.
Yeah, within Jewish thought.
Right.
It wasn't always associated with divinity.
Okay.
In the same way that like later Christian theology developed.
So are you saying that even though Jesus used this powerful imagery from Daniel, it might not have been a direct claim to be God?
It's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one way to interpret it. Okay. Some scholars argue that the Son of Man in Daniel primarily represents God's people.
Okay.
Israel. Elevated to a place of authority.
Okay.
So Jesus, by adopting this title, might have been emphasizing his role as like the representative of Israel.
Right.
The one chosen to usher in God's kingdom.
That's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, it adds a whole other layer how we can understand this verse.
It's not as simple as saying.
Right, exactly.
Well, he called himself Son of Man, therefore he must be claiming to be God.
There's more nuance than that.
We need to be careful about like imposing later theological interpretations onto a first century Jewish context.
Exactly.
So if we take a step back and consider Mauro's argument as a whole, does this one verse, even with its connections to Daniel, definitively prove Jesus's divinity?
I'd say it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
While the passage is definitely thought-provoking.
Yeah.
And Mauro raises some compelling points. Relying on a single verse to prove such a complex theological concept might be a little limiting.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like trying to understand the entire history of a country by just looking at a single photograph.
Exactly. You might get a glimpse of a specific moment.
Right.
But it doesn't give you the whole picture.
You're not getting the full story.
Exactly. And to fully grasp the different perspectives on Jesus's identity, we need to consider the broader context of his life, his teachings, his actions, and all the different interpretations that have emerged throughout history.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that engaging with these kinds of questions requires us to move beyond like simple answers.
Yeah.
It requires us to like dive into the historical context.
Exactly.
To grapple with the nuances of the language.
Yeah. And to acknowledge that there are all these different interpretations.
Absolutely. I think it's about embracing the intellectual journey.
Yes.
Being willing to wrestle with ambiguity.
Yeah.
And recognizing that understanding often comes in layers.
Right.
Not in these neat prepackaged answers.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
And it's something that we as curious individuals should keep in mind as we explore these topics.
For sure.
But before we wrap up completely,
okay,
I believe you have a final thought.
I do.
That might leave our listener with a question to ponder.
Yes. So we've discussed all these different interpretations of this Son of Man title.
Yeah.
But what if we take it a step further? What if we set aside the assumption that Jesus was making a direct claim to divinity?
Okay.
What other possibilities might emerge from the text itself?
Right.
What nuances could we uncover by exploring alternative readings within that specific historical and cultural context?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
It really challenges us to think beyond the familiar interpretations.
Yeah. And approach the text with fresh eyes.
And it reminds us that there's always more to discover.
Always.
More to unpack.
Absolutely. That's what makes these deep dives so rewarding. It's about the ongoing process of exploration, questioning, and discovery.
It's like we've given you the keys to this ancient library.
Right.
And now it's up to you to explore its hidden corners.
There's a whole world of interpretations and perspectives.
Right. And I love that analogy because it really highlights how this isn't about finding a single definitive answer.
Exactly.
It's about
the journey.
Engaging in this journey of discovery.
The exploration.
Wrestling with the complexities. And arriving at your own understanding.
And that process of exploration.
You know, that willingness to ask tough questions.
Yeah.
It can often lead to insights that are way more meaningful than any prepackaged answer.
Yeah, because you've really wrestled with it.
Exactly.
You've come to your own conclusion.
You've done the work.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope you feel empowered.
I hope so.
To continue this exploration on your own.
Keep digging.
We've uncovered some fascinating layers of meaning within this single verse.
Yeah.
But there's still so much more to uncover.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So remember, the tools are at your disposal. You have the text itself. You have the historical context. And you have the ability to critically examine different interpretations. So don't be afraid to challenge assumptions. Ask what if.
Ask those tough questions.
And to embrace the ambiguity.
Exactly.
And who knows?
Maybe you'll discover a perspective that totally reshapes your understanding.
That'd be awesome.
Of this passage and its implications.
That's the beauty of it.
That's so cool.
Engaging with these ancient texts.
Right.
They continue to speak to us across time and challenge us to think deeply about these big questions of life and faith and identity.
It's amazing how these ancient texts are still so relevant today.
Absolutely.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds engaged.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Until next time, happy deep diving.